Recently, I purchased the Leica M3, and in this video, I'm gonna share my first impressions about this camera and show you some sample photos. I've had my Leica M240 and 35mm Summicron spherical lens for a long time, and recently I added a 50mm TT Artisan f0.95 to my kit. And I also had my Nikon FE for occasionally shooting film, and also I had my beloved Zenith 122, which is my first SLR camera ever, as my other film camera. As a digital Leica owner and someone who appreciates Leica gear, I had resisted the idea of getting a film Leica for a very long time. But recently, as I became more serious about film, I finally gave up and decided to get a film Leica. But the question was which one? With Leica MP, M7 and M6 being out of my budget, my options were M4, M2 and M3. First, I thought because I use mostly 35mm on digital, I should choose between M2 and M4 given that they both have 35mm frame lines. Therefore, M2 easily became my main choice because I thought M4 used to be the less desirable model at its own time. But honestly, the prices are a little bit crazy these days, and at the time of my purchase, around November 2020, I couldn't find a good deal on Leica M2 or even a Leica M4. And instead, I found a good deal on a M3 body, and after noticing that on both of my film cameras I am used to 50mm lenses, I went on and purchased the Leica M3, and that's how I became a proud owner of a Leica M3. When it comes to the overall design, M3 and M240 look very similar, especially considering the almost 60 years time difference between these two. But if you carefully compare them, you will realize that Leica M3 is a little bit smaller and it's also a little bit shorter than M240. But the thing that is really important is that M3 is around 6mm thinner than M240. It might not sound like a very big difference, but it really shows when I handle the camera, and for some reason M3 gives me a much better grip. Leica M3 body weighs 591 grams, which is around 100 grams lighter than the M240, and this weight difference really shows when I handle the camera. Probably the most important difference between these two cameras, other than one being digital and the other one being a film camera, is the viewfinder. As you can see here, Leica M240 viewfinder gives you a magnification similar to a 28mm lens on a full frame. So you can see the 50mm and 75mm frame lines in the center. But with the same distance to your subject, M3 viewfinder gives you a much more zoomed in view similar to a 50mm lens on a full frame. So 50mm frame lines cover most of the viewfinder, and this is what can potentially help you better focus your 50mm lens on a Leica M3. One more thing is that the viewfinder has a blue tint to it, and it looked really weird to me at first, but I got used to it after a short while. One other thing is that the horizontal adjustment screw on Leica M240 is a hex that can be easily adjusted with a 2.5mm Allen key. But in Leica M3 it is a very thin flat head, and I couldn't really change it with anything because it requires a very thin blade. So I think it is useful to be able to calibrate your lens if you can't find the right screwdriver. One other annoying thing on Leica M3 is the tripod socket, which instead of being center is located on the right corner of camera, which is a little weird to me. Leica M3 has a maximum shutter speed of 1000 and goes all the way down to 1 second in full stops. And it also has a bulb setting too, but the interesting thing is that the shutter also works between the markings. The shutter sound and also the film advance sound of the camera is very quiet, and here you can compare it with my Nikon FE, Zenith 122 and also Leica M240. One thing that might seem a little bit difficult is how you load film into a Leica M3, especially that it has a separate film spool. It didn't bother me at all, and here you can see how I load film into my M3. One other thing about this camera is that it doesn't have a built-in light meter. In fact, this is my first camera that completely lacks any sort of light meter. My Nikon FE has a light meter with auto mode, and even my Zenith 122 has a simple built-in light meter. I was a little bit worried about it, and I was thinking of buying an external light meter, but then I thought maybe a simple light meter iPhone app could be enough for me. I also knew about the Sunny 16 rules and its extension for overcast and cloudy days, so I decided not to buy a light meter, and so far I have been okay with it. Here are some sample photos shot on my Leica M3 using TT Artisan 50mm f/0.95 that I took wide open with the help of an ND filter on Kodak Gold 200 film. And I should say that I really like the look of this lens on film. TT Artisan is not my only lens for this camera, and I also got myself a Canon LTM 50mm f1.8, and here is some sample shots on Kodak Gold 200 and also on HP5 black and white film. This is a very interesting lens, and I will probably make a video about it very soon. And finally, here are some photos using TT Artisan 50mm f/0.95 shot wide open on HP5, which in my opinion are some of my best shots using this lens. So that was it, my first impressions on Leica M3. Thank you for watching my video, and please feel free to subscribe to my channel and also follow me on Instagram.